Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Esteemed FaceTime with Leaders, an initiative by World Development Corporation. My name is Tanay All, and I work with World Development Corporation. FaceTime with Leaders is a platform for industry titans to share their experiences, knowledge, thoughts, ideas with one another, as well as future upcoming leaders. In a nutshell, we attempt to encapsulate the multi-decadal learnings acquired by these professional greats. We also hope that by conducting these FaceTime with Leader interviews, we can bring together a global community of eminent personalities. By bringing together such visionaries on one platform, we hope to play a part in inspiring the lives of other great leaders. Great learnings from great leaders undoubtedly assist everyone by identifying knowledge sharing community. We have one such domain leader on FaceTime with Leaders with us today, Padma Kiran Rao, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am, firstly, once more to our show.
Thank you, Tanay. Thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I will just give a small introduction about ma'am to all our viewers. She is a senior director of human resources with a remarkable track record spanning across her nearly 3-decade-long career, featuring a unique blend of skills and experiences that have left an indefinite mark on the HR landscape. With an innate ability to combine strategic thinking, execution prowess, and a deep understanding of multicultural dynamics, she has consistently been a transformative force within various multinational IT and consulting firms, VC companies, and of course, her own boutique HR consulting firm. Her expertise spans various HR domains, including assessment centers, competency development, coaching, leadership and talent development, training, intercultural and diversity, skills development, succession planning, organization structuring, due diligence, mergers and acquisitions, and the handling of sensitive board level transitions. Amazing, ma'am. Her current position is Head of Human Resources, Global Research and Delivery Centres at Kantar Global Delivery Centres. It's a privilege, ma'am, to have you on the show.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
So, ma'am, our first question is, to begin with, could you let our viewers know a little bit about your career journey so far?
So it's been a very interesting journey. It's as you said, it spans over 30 years. Started with an organization called CMC, which was bought by TCS. Now it's a part of TCS. In the days that when I joined, this was in 1989, straight from XLRI. This was considered to be one of the best companies from an HR perspective. It had received 2 or 3 awards almost in close succession, was respected extremely for its HR practices. So I think that was a great grounding or a great exposure into work for someone who wanted to in HR. And the gentleman, the chairman and managing director of CMC, PP Gupta, who was really the HR head. He would always say, I'm the HR head, and he actually headed the function. He did not want an HR head for the function. And we used to meet him every quarter at least. Mm-hmm. And we would have a 2-3 day HR seminar or a conference in Delhi. It was an eye-opener as to how you could think about small things, about big things. And he was a stickler for, with an eye for detail. And I think that kind of gives you, and things like, when you're making a letter for somebody who's a top performer, he would be the one who would sign for across the organization. You need to plan well in advance. And he did not want a grammatical error, a punctuation. It was that eye for detail. So you start developing that thinking as to what it means to an individual who's receiving that letter. And that was his objective. It was not just, he would say first time right and, quality and stuff like that. But I think it was more from how does the person who receives it, how will he or she feel if there is an error? And what are we communicating to the person, right? So I think you start developing that mindset pretty early in life, and I think that makes a big difference. I was also the head of HR for a branch in. So again, that gives you an exposure to all aspects of HR. And those days, definitely, you didn't have verticals and silos and all of that. So the HR function and the HR manager meant you have to handle everything. moved on to handle the region, and then decided I wanted an exposure in the manufacturing sector. So I guess my risk taking kind of showed up at that age, because I said, let me join. An opportunity came up to start to work with RPG BTP, which was a startup, greenfield venture with a specialty chemicals RPG group with the BTP group of the UK. They were wanted to set up a factory in specialty chemicals in Kanchipuram, and I was based in Chennai. So I said, great. I mean, I'll get an exposure to how do you have to deal with, getting factories licensed and, building a team ground up, not just from an HR perspective, but for the organization, creating the structure, understanding manpower planning, from that perspective, etc. Interesting journey, but very soon realized that I might have to move to Kanchipuram, because commute in those days between Chennai and Kanchipuram was almost impossible on a daily basis. It would take about 2 hours, sometimes three, and there would invariably be an accident every day. So it didn't make sense, and I didn't want to move to Kanchipuram. So I said, okay, let me look for an opportunity. And again, an opportunity came up with Dun & Bradstreet Satyam Software, which is today Cognizant Technology Solutions. And as I joined them as their head of HR, first head of HR, was with them for 7 years as their head of HR, was with them when we went for IPO, moved to the US with them to head the North American operations. Literally joined when there were 25 people. When I left, it was about 3,500 odd people. And interesting, because every year we were almost doubling. We were an organization that got, best practices in HR, PCMM level 5, almost around the time that I left. So all of that was something that I learned and I contributed to immensely. Most importantly, what stayed with me again from that journey was when I started. I remember a lot of people, because I was still in Chennai, people from CMC said, they came to visit me because I had just joined. And those days, the office was not even, it was like literally falling apart because things were being built. And people, I remember, went back and said, she's joined such a shabby organization. Has she done the right thing? All kinds of things, Yeah. And, so you need to back your gut. And my primary reason for joining them was, of course, the Dun & Bradstreet name. But out of that, even in that, it was Moody's that kind of stuck in my head. Moody's was a part of the Dun & Bradstreet stable. And I said, an organization that is the parent company of Moody's can't be bad. I mean, I didn't know much about Dun & Bradstreet in those days. But in the first 2 years, I also helped, in setting up Dun & Bradstreet. I would keep flying out over the weekends, spend time in Mumbai with the DNB team as they were forming their team. This was for the core business. So remember, the Cognizant was really their in-house center, right, for technology, in development and so on. But this was their core business that they were trying to set up. This was in 95, 96. So I would keep going every weekend. I would work with their team to interview people, to look at policies, look at compensation. And, initial practices like employee sat surveys, those were big in the US and the UK in those days. But in India, it was still not very popular. And I remember when I said, this is happening in the DNB organization, we have to bring it to India. I remember the chairman at that point telling me, why do you want to do it? I mean, really, do you want to spend your time on this? And I said, we need to build a certain culture. We need to have an understanding of what people want. And I believe those are things that I have pushed for and backed. The second thing that I pushed for was doing assessment centers. I think we were probably one of the first in the IT industry to have brought that. This was in 96, 97. I insisted that it needed to be done by the best. It was done by Saville and Holdsworth in those days. Understanding the requirement of the organization, backing myself, backing my ideas, selling my ideas. I think those were interesting. That was a very interesting journey. I got an opportunity to move to the US, moved, but unfortunately, soon after we had the crash, the internet crash, right? And then the focus became that, we would be only focusing on um, moving people to the US, augmentation, staff augmentation. And my job started becoming focusing on visas. And maybe I should have that tells you something about age and patience and stuff, but I really didn't have the patience. I said, I'm not going to be sitting and doing visas. I can do a lot more. And I decided to move back to India. Uh, Obviously, I had identified my successor before I moved to the US, and then I decided that it doesn't make sense. If I'm coming back early, I can't obviously tell my successor to move and give me space, right? And organization was still small in those days. Moved out, but started with a venture capital firm, which had big plans to get into genomics and biotechnology related stuff. Started by first CEO for Cognizant, for Dun and Bradstreet Satyam Software, Mr. Srini Raju in Hyderabad, and so I moved to Hyderabad. That was the first time I'd moved down south, and worked with them for 3 years. But the biggest idea in that organization was going to be the focus on biotechnology and genomics. But that one did not take off. Again, 9/11 happened, everything went quiet in 2001. And then, I was with them till 2003, but Deloitte started calling me chase me for about 6 months. I said, okay, and I spoke to Srini because I know Srini well. I've worked with him a long time. So I told Srini, I want to move. And he said, why don't you have a little more patience? I said, look, I'm not doing much. And I'd really like to keep myself occupied. And he said, I understand. So I moved to Deloitte. But what happened around that time, and this was something that I had been toying with before I left iLabs, which was to start my own consulting firm, a boutique consulting firm. And it so happened that two other people who I wanted to work with were also at a time ready around that time when I started Twarita. And otherwise, once people again get into jobs, it becomes difficult to extricate. So I decided that people are willing. Let me just get out. Moved out of Deloitte. I remember again talking to Srini, and Srini said, "You're getting out of Deloitte. There is an opportunity that I want to offer you." And I said, "You know what? I want to start my own consulting." Around that time, there was a firm that they had invested in, which was having some issues at the board. He said, I want you to step in and kind of deal with that. So that gave me my first exposure to what can happen in a board, which is not going right, in a board situation that's not going right. Was very interesting, very exciting. After that, did work, started my own consulting firm, ran it for about 9.5 years, did some excellent work with large firms, with small firms, different areas of HR, organization structuring, comp surveys. You sometimes, in the corporate world, you've used services, you've used consultants, and you tell them what you want, so you know what you want. But when you're also delivering it, then you understand the complete picture, right? So that was very interesting. But it so happened that post 2008, and we had invested in something, all of us had invested our own personal money. In 2007, we decided to invest in something which was a retail opportunity for people to come in and pick up soft skills and English. And we were very particular. We identified very good teachers. We said it has to be interesting curriculum. It has to be at the scale of a BBC and a British Council. that kind of quality of skills and language. And we should be able to get really high-end certification done quickly. Now, I don't know if it was a little ahead of its time, but 2008 happened, and we had invested our own money. We continued till about 2010, carrying the team. We didn't think it was a good idea to go and ask for money at that time. We weren't sure, honestly. I mean, maybe we didn't check enough, but we weren't sure. So things got to a point where we said it's probably better for now we bail out and we get back. So slowly each of the team members went, and I decided in 2014, I was the last to kind of move out. But so that was an experience too, stressful in its own way, but it was also extremely educating to identify your own resilience. What can keep you going, what can motivate you. I remember someone who's another exceller, much more senior, no longer there, unfortunately. I remember meeting him when I started Twarita, and he said, you've just started a journey. You have to be willing to sell the last shirt on your back. And I keep remembering that even now. And he said that kind of pagalpan, that kind of junoon you need to have. But I sometimes ask myself, did I give up early? Should I have stayed a little more? But I guess I'm also, along with resilience, along with being a dreamer, I'm also pragmatic enough. And I think that there is a time and place for things, and there's things you don't, you need to kind of cut the cord at some point. And so I moved back, got a good opportunity. It was, again, extremely freak kind of thing. Somebody told me there's an opportunity going at Societe Generale. Mm-hmm. I speak French and I speak Spanish. So, they said, you'll probably be an interesting profile for them. Woman, knows French, a lot of experience, the right kind of experience they're looking for. And I just sent in my resume to the CEO. And I said, look, I still have clients, so I have to do it very carefully. We have to be, so let me know if you're interested, and then proceed. And obviously, cut a long story short, I was with them for about 4 years in Bangalore. Great experience. And within the first year, I was elevated to what's known as the CODIR, or the Committee of Directors for HR. For across the group, they had about 30 people, and that's a big group, let's not forget. Mm-hmm. And I was put through a lot of paces before they decided I was good enough to be on that committee. And grew the organization from about 3,000 to about 7,500 or 8,000 when I left. Lots of different activities and work. Again, brought in the concept of assessments and assessment centers. And I think that was very, very much appreciated. It is a practice that's been honed further and has actually got public recognition, an award and stuff like that after I've left. But the point is, it's something that we created as a base process and what we wanted to do. And it's after it's been, I think, 3-4 years that they've gone in for some awards. But basically what I'm trying to say is that that's something that I like doing. Decided to move back also because I wanted to move. My father had passed away. My mother was, lives with me. She was happier in Hyderabad, so we wanted to move, and that's where her family is from. Moved back to Hyderabad, and was with. Then I toyed with the idea of starting Twarita again because I'd never shut it down. It was like file nil returns, right? So that's something that I kept doing. For about, then I got an opportunity to consult with an organization which was into semiconductor design.
Okay.
Did that for about 2 years, and then Kantar came calling saying, this is a global role, would you be interested? And that's what interested me, because primarily because it was a global role. I'm responsible for 7 different centers. as a size, overall size, we're about 2,500 people that I'm responsible for, but they are across across geographies. But I did toy with the idea, saying, I ran a center, grew it to 7.5. Is this big? Is this small? But this was different challenges because it's different geographies. And with SocGen, I got an opportunity to polish up my French.
Oh.
With Kantar, I get an opportunity to polish up my Spanish. So and these were dreams when I was learning them when I was in university, that I want to join an organization where I can, apply this and actually polish them up and work, in a bilingual kind of an environment where I become bilingual. And that's the excitement for me that's been there. And Kantar, it's been complete transformation. I mean, SocGen was also a lot of transformation because we had to grow it from, as I said, 3,000 to 7.5, bring in new entities and their support, bring in obviously a different way of thinking. The way you think when you're 2,000, 2,500, and when running a 7.5 organization is very different. The significance of the organization, and as I was the last 1 year, we were looking at how we can work with NASSCOM to be like a catalyst and try out new things as part of, be one of the people with NASSCOM who can work with small organizations, bring in new ideas into the organization, etc. Worked on the RPA, understanding what RPA would do. So I think, and in Kantar, again, when I joined, we were probably about 1,400, but and most of the growth has happened through the COVID period between 2020 and 2021 end. A lot of it. Now we are in the next phase of growth, which is really to look at how we can bring in more technology, more and more technology. And this is market research. We do a lot of custom market research for clients. Again, different industries. When I was with doing my consulting gig, I had I had to travel to Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, and do assignments. So it's given me a lot of exposure. When I look back, this is something that Kantar CEO says, which kind of stays with me every time he says it. When it sometimes seems like it was just yesterday and nothing's really changed. But when you look back, there's been so much change and so much growth and so much learning,
Yeah.
So that's my story.
An amazing one, ma'am. Ma'am, you told about a wonderful list of achievements that you've, been through, enjoyed, all of it. But if you had to pick out a couple of like your biggest achievements, what would those be?
Till probably 2004, 5, 6, I might have said the Cognizant IPO. A couple of things, because around 1996 end, Dun & Bradstreet went through a divestiture. And around that time, we had decided that we wanted to rebrand ourselves as Cognizant, because you never know. We were attached to IMS Health, but they may decide to disinvest and all of that, right? So we did not want a confusion. We went in for that. Around that time, we also started saying, okay, we might have to start thinking of going for an IPO, and also look for external clients. That was the time when the Indian IT services industry was beginning to grow. Infosys was a big name, Wipro was a name, TCS was obviously a big name, but TCS was always seen as, you go and do travel a lot more traveling outside than, right? In those days, at least. But what I think I got a lot of kick out of was when we started, I would present the HR story and the HR present Cognizant from an HR perspective to prospective clients. And when we decided to go in for the IPO, to the bankers, etc.
Okay.
Invariably, they would come back and say this was the best presentation, the best story. And that would give me such a high. Because and in fact, after the bankers had come back, I mean, because it was something I was doing for the first time, and you start looking at what positioning of the brand, what positioning of HR can do to the brand of the organization, right? And how it can be seen as branding within and branding without. Because obviously, everyone loves a successful organization. Everyone loves a successful brand. How do you position the brand inside also makes a difference. So, people would say, yeah, I want Kiran to make the presentation to this prospective client because we want to win it. And you obviously got a high out of something like that. Today, I might, I say obviously starting Twarita, running it, because we built it into a good brand. It was recognized. A lot of people would say, we want to work with you. We've heard about you. Sometimes it was just a training assignment, but sometimes it was really big. Whether it was ITC, whether it was Ivy, Comtech, we've done work, and many of them are repeat clients. Someone was starting an organization in India. They were monetizing brand values and IP and stuff like that. It was a legal and tech firm.
Okay.
By Goldman Sachs. And they had moved into India. They met up 3 organizations. They were setting base in Bangalore. We were based out of Hyderabad. They met 2 other organizations from Bangalore, but they said, we want to work with you guys. So those are things that stay with you. If you, it's I guess it drives your passion.
Yeah.
And fuels it in a way. So yeah, I would put Twarita. I would also, I definitely like what I've done at Cognizant, at SocGen, and doing at Kantar. But I guess Twarita is my baby, so it will always stay with me as something close.
Ma'am, since you are an NLP practitioner and trainer of emotional intelligence, what do you believe are some common stress factors at workplaces, and could you suggest ways to just curb and deal with them?
I personally think first and foremost, stress comes from expectations, right? Expectations you have of yourself, expectations you think others have of you. And that's what I'm saying. You think others have of you. It's not necessarily what others really have of you. Expectations that you think you have of the situation, what you want the outcome as. So a lot of it is internally driven, right? There will be some time. Obviously, your boss will have some expectations of you. Your team will have some expectations of you, but largely it's internally driven, and you have to learn to recognize that. What you want the outcome to be, many a time also will create a certain stress, right? So you need to step back and ask yourself, are you being honest? Are you being practical? Are you being too ambitious? And if you want to achieve what you want to achieve, what all are the resources you have? So are you being realistic? Does it need to be a step achievement, or does it have to be the whole hog right up front?
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing. Being honest with yourself. It's not easy. And I'm also majorly into yoga. So one of the things that yoga talks about is vrittis and vasanas, which is tendencies, right? You can train yourself as much, but there is a certain way your mind works, an angle. Which is called a tendency. right? So when you look at it from that perspective, you may be a person who'll say, I want the star and the moons right up front. But then you have to ask yourself, is that practical? Then maybe you need to ask your boss, you need to ask your team, what can we realistically get done? And what do we want to get to? What point do we want to get to? Right? I think that's important. Second, I think we need to learn ourselves what de-stresses us. So, and we need to find our own de-stresses. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. So, I mean, I like to I like art. So I like traveling. I like yoga. I like writing. So I tell myself which one is it going to be, so that I can work, so I can work out my stress and work on myself. So sometimes it's travel. I like exploring a new culture. So for me, it's a stress buster. For some, it might be cooking.
Yeah, true. Finding that, I guess, is important just to, get a break and think of something else.
And also understand why are you getting stressed, which I think that's and that's the aspect of emotional intelligence that I really like. I don't think any of us will get to a point, I mean, maybe some will, but they'll probably be gurus or highly evolved people, where you can identify the emotion as it is coming up, right? And address it. But I think if you are in touch with yourself, even if it's not as it's coming up, you will realize pretty much the same day or the next day what was the emotion that you were going through.
Yeah.
Right? And at some point you will start closing that gap between now and the later. Right?
One has to. Ma'am, the next question is, since you worked across, multiple geographies in the HR domain, do you believe that there is a disparity between ESG dispositions across cultures? And what advice would you give industry leaders to bring about ESG alignment in their workforces?
So first of all, I do think that ESG is increasingly something that's becoming extremely important across the
Okay.
globe. But if you ask me, I personally think probably Japan as a culture is intrinsically towards ESG, towards sustainability, towards environment. I think it is part of their ethos. I do think.
Yeah.
Europe, probably, again, the reason I say Europe is they are definitely a lot more evolved in their thinking of ESG. Most of the countries, but whether it is their focus on plastic, whether they're green focused. Let me put it this way: they focus on slow living, etc., etc. I think there's a lot more focus there compared to, let's say, the Americas. Having said that, I also think that's probably because they are smaller countries and they realize that they only have so many resources. It may be a rich country, but it's a smallish country. So it's never, it's going to last only so long, kind of a thing, right? That awareness is there. Whereas when you look at the Americas, but at least the North American space, whether it's Canada, whether it's the US, while many of them may be quite aware, they also are very large countries with lots of space and resources. So I do think that sometimes has its own impact on the way they think, right? There is a tendency to think it's abundant, it's endless, whatever, right? So you don't see it actually getting over in this lifetime, and that's the aspect. The second thing probably is because, as I said, Japan, India may have, but it's not yet playing up or showing up as part of the ethos. But these cultures have traditionally been very conscious environment. And again, for Europe, maybe again because of history, right? So their willingness to look at everything at um, different aspects of diversity, because diversity is an element of being environmentally conscious also. And I'm not saying just being from an ESG perspective. I'm saying even being environmentally conscious, you need to have that appreciation of different cultures and diversity, which probably in a more one is the space, but I also think also because the US culture tends to be, while it's a melting pot, it has come from a very uniformish kind of environment initially, right? So I think that it'll take time. They will probably develop that approach as a culture also.
Yeah. Ma'am, as an ESG and corporate governance expert, what do you feel are the values that you bring to the table the most?
I think I think there's two or three things that I bring to the table. One, my appreciation of different cultures, um, and my innate curiosity, right? So I think what that obviously brings is my ability to connect dots, ask questions to connect dots. Right? Let me put it
Yeah.
this. So, and I'll give you an example. Uh, One of the, about when I was running Twarita, I would attend CEO forums and stuff like that. So one of the forums, there was a presentation about how we were going, we had great demographic dividend coming up, because we were a young country, and we would be young for the next 30, 40 years, etc., etc., and a large chunk. And then probably one or two sessions before that, we had heard a speaker talk about how we have the red belt in this country, and that could become a problem for us, right? Because the red belt is the Maoists, and so I said, yeah. So we are now saying that we're going to have great demographics that will work for us, but if we don't have jobs for everyone, then if you connect the two conversations, you're going to be in trouble, right? Because then obviously there's going to be frustration, there's going to be social unrest, etc. And that's something that also has been said a lot by a lot of other thinkers and economists in India, that could be our undoing. Now, one of the things, so I and the next thing that I said is, okay, we could possibly then export talent to some of the countries that are aging. That's an option, right? So this is the way my brain works. That's an option, but then those people have to be willing to accept you.
Yeah,
And
that
it's
also.
RPA. A lot of RPA conversations were happening in 2014, 2015. And I said, okay, now you're going to have RPA, which basically then means you have more automation. So even in an aging society, you may have RPA coming in, and probably they may not need as many people or foreigners coming in, right? Because again, there is this, not every society likes a lot of foreigners. So you have to look at, so what are the options then?
Yeah.
But what got me thinking, and I haven't really explored it, but what's got me thinking recently is after the G20, one of the things I understand that they did was to map all the skill sets and what each country brings to the table, right? So if this is as I understand it, and I really need to explore it a little more, if it is as I understand it, we do have a lot of rich skill sets, whether it's doctors in the field of medicine, in the field of engineering, in the field of education, etc. There might be other countries which are aging, which might still be interested, despite the RPA, despite the work, right? So, and I'm I'm not saying that. So I do feel that these are that's the way my mind works. And I think that's the curiosity I can bring to any team, right? So I will ask these questions, which is what a governance person should be doing. What are the risks? What are the opportunities? And how are we going to kind of help build the organization from that perspective? What are how do you extrapolate information from and look at possibilities. It may not always be right, but it will be a possibility, right? And I think that's what I bring to the table. And of course, I do bring in a certain sense of right and wrong, which is, I think, very important at that level. I think it's important at every level, but I think it's definitely very important at that level. So your sense of right and wrong, you will ask the right questions, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think both of them, my curiosity and a sense of right and wrong, is a great combination.
Whatever anyone needs at the table, you bring to the table, basically.
I don't know if they, but then these are two big strengths.
Whatever they should need.
And as I said, resilience, right? So that's also a strength in its own way.
Yeah, 100%. Ma'am, what are some of the most remarkable changes you've seen in your field with respect to changes in technology? And what changes do you expect to see with the advent of all the new technologies like IoT, AI, ML, blockchain, Web 3.0, all of that coming in?
So I will be honest, I haven't done much homework on that, or as in I've not done much reading. But my sense, obviously, some of them will have a bigger impact than the others, right? Um, having having said that, I mean, one sees you will find application of technology in the area of recruitment, in the area of training significantly, uh, because you can reduce time, you can reduce effort, um, you can uh, you can assess, you can you can cover a larger footprint. I think all of that brings to the brings a lot of is a lot of benefit. But I do also think that there will be many also rats. There'll be a lot of people, be promising tools will come up, but there will be 10 similar tools, and then one of them becomes popular because of some specific reason, right? Because they have a feature, they have a certain service, I don't know, whatever, right? So they tell their story well. That will therefore work better for them. I think it is important uh, to also apply these to the size of the organization, the time of the organization, or the age of the organization. Not everything works for the organization at every time. So obviously, when you're doing your analysis about trying to bring in something, you need to see what works at that moment. So what's very exciting, what was exciting, probably 8 years, 9 years back, about recruitment tools. Now there's so many of them. You need, if you want to bring something, you really have to see which one works for you, for your reality, for your, for your wallet, and what will work in the longer term for you, at least, the next 6, 8 years. So that's the way I look at technology. And I still believe technology is something that's a tool or a servant. It's not the master. The human brain is still the master.
100%. Ma'am, as you know, we are building a community here of industry magnates. The move is meant for cross-pollination of knowledge and building a knowledge-sharing community of corporate giants and industry experts like you. What are your thoughts about this initiative taken by Mr. Zishan Pathan, Mr. Hival Mehta, and the whole World Development Corporation team?
I think it's a fantastic initiative. I think it helps learn from each other. It's also, I hope, and that was something that sounded as a possibility for me, or seemed as a possibility when I started exploring the program that you'll offered, that one needn't necessarily get restricted to the boundaries of India, right? And it is so there will always be geographies that are more developed, and you learn and contribute a
Yeah.
little, but there will be other geographies that are developing, and you can contribute a lot more maybe, and also learn. There'll be different kinds of learning, but also learn. But and so it just seemed like an opportunity, or opening up a world of possibilities. That's the way
Yeah.
I, and learning from
Uh,
each other, of course,
Learning from
from each other.
Yeah, 100%. Great, ma'am. It was fantastic conversing with you, and I'm confident that all of what you told today will be like greatly inspiring to anyone who hears this, or any future leader. Thank you for joining us today, and wish you the best for your future endeavors. Moreover, trust that this initiative by Directors Institute unquestionably expanded the participants' understanding and enriched their minds.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pleasure
Thank
talking.
you so.
Bye.
Same here, ma'am. Have a great day ahead.
Bye.